Welcome to the Bubblehead Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Erik with my co-host Robert. We're back here to talk some Bubblehead Fantasy Football content. How you doing, Robert?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm excited. It feels like the NFL season is nearly here. Got news happening every hour, it seems like.
I don't know. I think we need to bring up the big news of the day here. The Bubblehead Fantasy Football podcast is finally going to video. I think that's big news for everybody, and I really hope that our listeners kind of enjoy this new little segment we have. Kind of hope that and give us any feedback you guys have on our video and what you want to see us improve on.
No, you're right, Robert. Forget the Deshaun Watson ruling. Forget the Miami Dolphins losing a first-round pick. Forget Tim Patrick maybe going down with a serious knee injury. Bubblehead Fantasy Football Podcast is on video. That's the news of the day. That's the news of the week. You heard it here, folks. Please follow me at Erik, Erik_Bubblehead on Twitter. Love to interact with you and hear what you think and discuss strategy in the fantasy football space.
And yeah, and you can find me at BBH Robert. And like Erik was saying, we're both really good about interacting with people on Twitter. If you have any questions for us, please let us know. I don't know about you, but now let's jump in. Let's jump into some of the news of the day. And for us, I think the big news here that we're going to start off with on today's episode is conference realignment. In our next episode today, we have a double feature today. We're going to be doing running backs and wide receivers. We wanted to talk about conference realignment first, and then on our next episode about wide receivers, that's when we're going to kind of jump into kind of the big NFL news. But for NCAA news, the conference realignment, it's a big deal, right? I think the kind of the big key there is that USC, UCLA moved, right? But is there anything else coming? And what do you think?
Well, I appreciate you, Robert, steering me back on course. Yep, we're going to be covering the conference realignment now. And I obviously bringing the two Southern California schools into the Big Ten really kind of like breaks the mold that people were clinging on to about college football. We're in a different world. Right? Players are getting compensated, and now it's just a free-for-all to make these super conferences. I do not think we're anywhere near done. I think that Texas and Oklahoma's entry into the SEC really changed the game, because all of a sudden the Big Ten realized they need to keep up. They need to find good teams. They need to find good markets, and they need to find, they need to add stuff to the war chest, because the SEC already had a leg up on them. My real question is, what happens outside of the conferences of the SEC and the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think it depends on the timing, right? I think Clemson and Notre Dame are kind of the big dominoes left there, and I'm curious kind of how that's going to play out. I think with what a lot of people kind of don't realize is that there's a kind of a Notre Dame doesn't really have they're independent, but they're technically a part of the ACC. And if Notre Dame leaves, then the ACC I think Clemson's going to follow them. But then again, if Clemson leaves the ACC, then I think Notre Dame's got to follow. And Notre Dame, they've been big on having this independence for so many years now, but that's not working for them anymore, I don't think. And I think that they will eventually look at the money that the Big Ten's getting, the SEC's getting, and say, I want to be a part of that money. I want that money. I want that level of notoriety that they have.
Yeah, I agree that Notre Dame, I think they are the biggest domino to fall, and I think that's why we haven't seen any further movement. I think, right, the Big Ten said we can snatch up the LA market in entirety, and we can also add, a USC that is very storied in for a long time, but even more recently, right? UCLA hasn't done anything recently, but obviously, a long time ago they were good. Notre Dame, you're right. They do have that tie-in. I think it's 4 games a year. They have a agreement to play ACC. But I mean, they're in Indiana. They're in the heart of Big Ten country. I think that they align with those schools a lot more, right? They're very similar academically to, a lot of the Big Ten schools. They're going after the same, people for the most part, students and athletes. But what it comes down to is money. It comes down to money, money, money. And eventually, Notre Dame's going to realize they can make more money going to one of these 2 conferences than staying independent because, right, they have their own channel, their own network, similar to the Big Ten network and SEC network, et cetera, et cetera. They have their own network, and that's helped them over time, but eventually that's not going to be the most profitable. So they'll change.
Yeah, and I think another kind of factor in here too is basketball. It's one of those, probably the second most second biggest sport in college for making money. And I think one of the interesting things for the SEC, at least, is taking Clemson, UNC for football mostly, but also including Duke with that UNC package for basketball purposes. And then, maybe including a school like, I think probably the best bet is either Virginia or maybe like Virginia Tech, but can't throw out Florida State. You can't throw out Miami because those, especially Florida State, they have that longtime rivalry with Florida. So I think it's going to be interesting. And, I think it's going to be something that we kind of that we have to keep in mind for many years. But I think college football is going to look completely different in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the rapid change of the landscape. It'll be really interested to see what teams are moved next. Well, really, what teams are moved after Notre Dame. I think that's the big one. But yeah, it's exciting. I'm not sure if it's good for the sport long term. But I will say I know that it's going to change a lot of things. I wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of schools that say, you know what, we don't want to have a football team anymore. I could definitely, right, there's 131, 133 maybe. Every year it's been changing. FBS programs right now, and I think that number is going to start shrinking.
I don't know about that. Even the SES makes pretty good money, so
yeah,
but
it's
I mean, it's definitely something that I think is going to change maybe the bottom line. It's going to, instead of having teams that are, they're just a part of the Pac-12, and because of USC and because of Oregon, they're able to make, a pretty solid chunk of change. Well, now they're not making that. And now maybe that affects the bottom line for the rest of their sports teams. And I think that's kind of where you can feel it the most is in with the other sports teams, because that's how a lot of universities pay for other sports, is through college football and college basketball.
It's true, for sure.
All right. Well, you ready to jump into the running back rankings today?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into some Devy conversation. I'm so hyped.
All right. So this is going to be based off of Erik's rankings. So, I think you want to jump us off. What's your tier 1?
Yeah, so, of course, what you meant to say was the correct rankings, but I'll forgive you for that mistake. But for me, it's pretty clear. You got Bichon Robinson and Trayvon Henderson. These are 2 superstars. Bichon is at Texas. He's a draft-eligible running back in the 2023 class, and Trayvon, he's only a true sophomore this upcoming season, so he's not eligible till 2024. Kind of different situations, right? Bichon is, like, in many ways, the leading force to try and bring Texas back to being good, right? He played on some really bad teams these last 2 seasons. Trayvon Henderson, right? He's on an absolutely loaded team, and really he's just, an embarrassment of riches on that roster. But they're both very talented, both highly, highly ranked, coming out of high school, and they've produced in their time. I find it hard to choose between, either one of them. But for me, only this tier one of the running backs. But if I'm looking at Devy draft startup, this is my number 1 or 2 pick if I have either of them.
You're not taking a quarterback first?
Nope.
No. I can get that. I think that I think these are definitely the clear tier one, and I don't have anything really else to say about it other than I would say that maybe you take a quarterback first, but at the same time, I think you can't go wrong with the running backs here just because running backs are just as hard as quarterbacks to nail down in college. And especially once you get these guys that are going to be at least first-round picks. And the only reason I say they're not like top 5, top 10 is just because the NFL doesn't really take running backs top 5, top 10 anymore, and I think both of these guys are probably that kind of talent if this was like, 15, 20 years ago, but I don't see a guarantee that position ever again. I don't like, you almost have to be a, Saquon Barkley level talent, and you have to have a bad organization that's willing to take a shot on you over, a quarterback, over offensive lineman, whatever. And I definitely don't see that in 2023, and I don't know if that's going to be realistic in 24 either. But yeah, I think Bichon Robinson's the first guy here, and then I think Trayvon Henderson's here number 2, and that's just because of Bichon Robinson's going to be coming in a year earlier than Trayvon Henderson. So, but I think both are superstars. So,
yeah, pick your poison here. To me, it's really is a 1A, 1B. It's really hard for me to choose, put one above the other. And it's interesting to bring up Saquon because I think these are the 2 most talented running backs since Saquon Barkley was in college. And right, Saquon's the last really high first-round pick at running back. That was back in the Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold class. And you're right, people don't value running backs in the NFL as much, the front office. So if even they get first-round draft capital at all, I'm pumped, right? Look at how all these great second-round running backs we've had recently. Swift, Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, Javonte Williams. There's a very long list of second-round running backs that have been crushing it. So as long as they can make, top 50 picks, I have them as effectively being equal to a first-round wide receiver just because of the way the NFL values the position in terms of my draft capital worth for that.
Yeah. Do you have anything else about tier 1? Do you want to jump into tier 2?
Yeah, no, let's do it.
All right. So tier 2, you got Braylon Allen, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Nicholas Singleton. So I think Nicholas Singleton's probably going to be your biggest riser if he has a big year this year, right?
Yeah, he's a Nicholas Singleton could be, Trayvon, next year. We could be talking about him as a top 2, 3 pick in Devy startups because super talented player. He has all the recruiting accolades you could want. But, right, he's a true freshman. So what are we going to get? We don't know. There's plenty of true freshmen that, have all the accolades and that they don't show out. So this one is definitely a bit of a projection, but he's a good there's hard to ask for anything more. You've got, as an 18-year-old, this guy's 6 foot, 210. He's super highly rated, right? Not only is the number 1 recruit by 24/7 composite, he's 31st overall in the entire country. So, right, in these 3, we have 3 different classes. We have 23, 24, and 25, right? So that's really all I have to say about Singleton. He's a total projection. And this is kind of like when you take a rookie QB, that's highly touted in a startup draft in the NFL side. Like you're just hoping that he hits and then he just vaults into the next level. Gibbs and Allen, they've showed it. They've proven that they're legit college players, superstar college players. Question is does it translate? Allen is more of the bruiser. He's a big dude. Gibbs is the closest thing that I've seen since Kamara in terms of that comp.
Yeah, I think with Braylon Allen, he was definitely not expected to be the starter in Wisconsin. He took the job from Madusi as a true freshman, which I think that's very impressive. Madusi or Malusi was the transfer from Clemson, and he started off the year amazingly for Wisconsin, and then Braylon Allen came out of nowhere and I really like Braylon Allen. I think he could be a potential another guy who could be in Tier 1 next year. I think with Nicholas Singleton and Braylon Allen, I think both of them are potential Tier 1 guys next year. And I think with Braylon Allen, it's the same thing with we said about Jonathan Taylor. We want to see him catch the ball more. Well, that's not what Wisconsin does.
No.
Like they don't do that. And so we're never going to see that. It's always going to be a projection with Braylon Allen. And I think he can. But I think that's going to cause him to go in the second round of the draft in the NFL. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I have to say that would say, well, maybe I won't put him in Tier 1. But
yeah, I mean, he's a pretty similar player to Kenneth Walker this year in terms of the production profile, right? Phenomenal runner, absolute dominant in the Big Ten, but almost no passing game usage. And I'm with you. I think it's just system. That's the system that Wisconsin is. I mean, we have so many running backs that have proven that. You go all the way back to Melvin Gordon. It was the same situation with him. Melvin Gordon's a fantastic pass catcher. He's had a great career as a receiving running back. Jonathan Taylor has shown, he's extremely competent at catching the ball. For me, and that's a really good point. It comes to how I'm valuing running backs. I'm no longer like, what did they do catching the ball? I'm looking at it as a few different categories. It's they are a weapon in the passing game, a la a Jahmyr Gibbs. They are competent, right? They can catch the ball, right? When given the opportunity, they do what you want. And then there's the third category where it's when given the opportunity, they fail. So it's a pass, fail, superstar, you are a wide receiving weapon. And I'm at this point, Braylon Allen, I would think, is going to probably go into the pass category, right? So it's not so much a hit because I realize this system they're running at Wisconsin.
Yeah. So let's move on to Tier 3. What's your Tier 3 look like?
So Tier 3, this is we're really getting into some of the more projections, right? Specifically, Donovan Edwards, Raheem Sanders, Branson Robinson. So Robinson's a freshman. We haven't seen anything from him, but he's a highly touted player going to Georgia. And I mean, call me, I'm scouting the helmet somewhat in this. Georgia has put out running back after running back after running back that's very good. So Branson Robinson, I think, could be the next one. He's a good player, and that room is pretty open for him to. I doubt he'll, be the leading rusher on the team as a freshman, but I definitely think he'll get, some opportunity to show what he can do. Sanders out of, Edwards and Sanders. Edwards had more opportunity, and this is a big player that's fast that did some good things in the SEC. He kind of snuck up on me. He didn't quite have the recruiting profile that Donovan Edwards did, but I mean, Sanders is legit. And then Edwards, honestly, might be the most talented out of every player on this list in this tier. He just didn't get a ton of opportunity with Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins last year. The other names are a lot more well-known in the Devy world. Bigsby, Zach Evans, Shipley, Tucker. So, I mean, Tucker's probably the lowest ranked recruit out of high school on my whole list. Not quite, but close. He's the second lowest, right? Syracuse guy, but you know what? He has just been dynamite there. And my only concern is is he just a product of super volume and just being like the sole focus at Syracuse? And he's not playing super great, defenses all the time in the ACC. Um, yeah, I mean, what do you think of some of these players at my tier 3?
Yeah, so I think Will Shipley is probably the best option of the group, and Will Shipley and Donovan Edwards. I think those are the top 2 of the 2024 class that are not, that are listed here. And but that's not to say take anything away from Raheem Sanders. This is kind of why, though. This is why 2023 and 2024. This is why I would love to get draft capital for this in a dynasty league in the NFL. We're talking about stacked running back talent. I could easily see 8 people being drafted in the 9 people being drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft, and both these years. So, but yeah, I mean, so Will Shipley, right? I like him a lot. I think he was a highly rated recruit. Donovan Edwards, he's a guy that I think is going to take over the backfield in Michigan, and they like to run the ball. I think with a little bit more opportunity there, he'll be able to take that and run with it. Branson Robinson, I don't think he's going to be great this year. I think you probably are looking at a breakout in 2023 season. Excuse me, but for Zach Evans, Tank Bigsby, Sean Tucker, so one, we've already talked about a few guys from 2023 class, so it's not even like these are the top guys, but these are guys that would be the top, that could potentially beat out Bryce Hall this year if they were in the draft. I think if you gave me a choice between Zach Evans and Tank Bigsby, they would be very close to the Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker types. And Sean Tucker, I just have him a little bit lower. He's not a favorite of mine. I think he's going to kind of be one of those guys that's maybe just a primary first and second down back. But I just don't. I don't know if I trust the SEC or the ACC running with him. So other than that, though, my biggest thing is I think Tank Bigsby, he had kind of a disappointing year last year, relative to projections. And so he could potentially, if he has a bounce back year, and Auburn was terrible last year. Let's not forget that Auburn was just terrible. If Auburn and him can come back and have a good season, I think he's got the potential to go into, and be a big riser as well. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to give Bigsby a bit of a pass because that Auburn team was in disarray. And the only reason, right, you say it was a disappointment is just because what he did as a true freshman, right? He still had a very good sophomore season. It just wasn't, being in the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, like Doak Walker Award winner conversation. But, I mean, out of all these backs, Bigsby might be the best pure runner of the football. My question is, what can he do as a pass catcher? That's where he's going to go from being a good RB2 in the NFL, in my opinion, to being, like a top 5 superstar. Bigsby is a phenomenal rusher. I mean, he reminds me actually a lot of a fellow SEC running back, Nick Chubb. He's just a beast and he runs hard and he's got great vision. His passing game is, it's like, I mean, Chubb, we've seen plenty and he's okay, but he's not great. Bigsby, we haven't seen much. So I'm curious, what develops there.
Yeah, he could still get on the field, though, on third down just through pass protection. And that's kind of the big way for rookies, especially, to get on the field is through pass protection, especially if they're not great as a third down, catching back. I think he's capable. But like you said, I think that you kind of have to, there's a bit of a projection there in terms of what you think he can do for through the passing game.
Yeah, something I wanted to just kind of piggyback on your idea of the 23 and 24 running back class. Not only do we have good talent in these classes, and a lot of it, think about where the state of running backs in dynasty fantasy football is right now in the NFL. We have a lot of older running backs getting drafted pretty high. Right, so we've got, think of the Derrick Henrys, even, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Even Joe Mixon's a little older. Like, there's a lot of these running backs. CMC's a bit older, right? All these running backs that are in the top 20 in dynasty rankings for the most part. A lot of them, in 2 years, in 3 years, when these players are, really starting to get their chance, they're all going to be gone. So we could be looking at like the new crop of great dynasty running backs.
Yeah, and you don't want to miss your chance on a top 10 dynasty asset at this point, right? So, I like what you said, right? You have a potential to get a guy who could be a very long-term option in that. But do you have anything else about the tier 3 guys? You want to jump into tier 4?
Well, yeah, just kind of to keep going on that idea, right? About the value, right? If you are to get a Devy superstar running back, that's the cheapest they'll ever be in terms of the cost to acquire them. Now, right, you might miss on them, but you can get these players even in tier 3 pretty deep into your draft, in the late 3rd, 4th, maybe even early 5th for some of these players in your Devy startup draft, right? If you wait a couple of years to pick them, as a rookie, as a second-year player, their cost is so much higher. So I think these are great players to go and take a swing at and try and, get a little bit ahead of the value.
Yeah. So for tier 4, big guys here. A lot of these are Emmanuel Henderson's kind of a projection. Byron Cardwell and Zach Charbonnet. I think those it's a little bit of a drop off there. I think with Emmanuel Henderson, you're kind of hoping for. Obviously, he's a projection as a prospect. He hasn't played a single snap in college yet. So, but what's your thoughts on this ranking here?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally hit it on the head. This is a big drop off from tier 3 to 4. I think the top 3 tiers are like by far and away, like the gap between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 are tiny compared to 3 and 4. Yeah, like you said, Henderson, he's a highly rated recruit, right? So, who knows? But we haven't seen anything at college, and he's going to Alabama. Guess what? Alabama cycles in superstar, ranked recruits every year. Sometimes,
they just signed
multiple.
they signed like a 4-star and a 5-star this year
Yeah.
in this 2023 class. So literally just next year, he has competition from 2 highly rated freshmen. So does he play next year? Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's definitely part of the reason why I put, the other 25 running backs ahead of him is because I feel he's got a lot more competition. And I'm worried about that. But that being said, hey, he could transfer, right? He's still highly rated. If it doesn't work out, he could transfer. There have been a number of Alabama running backs in the past that have found some success that way. Moving on, Charbonnet. I think Charbonnet really screwed up not coming out this year. I think he would have been like RB 3 or 4 in this class. And I think he's going to be RB like 6 or 7 in 23. So I don't get it, Maybe he was getting a good NIL deal and he said, you know what, like I'm going to make as much coming back this year as I will my rookie year, so screw it. Okay, fine. And, that's one thing. But this is a highly rated player who, he went to Michigan and it just didn't work out in Michigan and he transferred to UCLA. And he had a great year last year. He really did. He rushed really hard for Chip Kelly. He was very impressive. Honestly, for a lot of Devy people, Charbonnet was left for dead and totally resurrected his stock last year. If he can, have another year and even build on it, he would be, in my projection, I'm thinking like a late 3rd, 4th round pick in the NFL draft. Like this is a guy who could kind of beat the statistics because typically, you got to be a first 3-round pick to be any good, usually statistically. But he's a solid player. He was highly recruited for a reason, but he's definitely, down a little bit on my tier, obviously here, where he got some big projections. Why don't you tell me what you think about those two, and then we can get into Byron Cardwell.
Yeah, so I think Zach Charbonnet, I think he's got the most potential to continue to rise. But again, right, we're talking there's a lot of 2023 guys ahead of him. But that's not bad, right? There's a lot of potential in 2023 for running backs. And I think Zach Charbonnet, he's just another guy on that list. He should have probably come out this year. He probably would have gone in the second or third round, I think. But maybe not. Maybe he was getting other information from the NFL draft. Because, they give you your ranking, the projected ranking of where you're going to go. And if you've got, I'm going in the 5th round, well, obviously he's going to come back to school for that. And, for Emmanuel Henderson, I just don't have any interest just because I know who they're bringing in next year. I don't, and that's my issue with Alabama. Just really, it's so hard to nail down who's going to be their starter, especially if you're a lower 4-star for me, or even if you're a medium 4-star. I just don't really have that much interest in you for Alabama because I know they're going to bring in another 5-star or another high 4-star recruit to replace you.
You're right, but let's just give Henderson his due. He is the number 2 running back recruit via 24/7 Sports Composite. He's a very, very high 4-star. He definitely has the pedigree. But you're right that they just cycle those guys in every year, 1 to 2, 2 of them each year at running back. So competition is as fierce at Bama, as it probably is anywhere.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Ohio State too, honestly. So, but for Byron Cardwell, what's your kind of thoughts there?
So the biggest knock I have on Cardwell is that he's an Oregon Pac-12 running back. But this is a good player who, he's a freshman. He didn't get a ton of opportunity, but he's right. They had Travis Dye last year, and Travis Dye had a great season. But guess what? Travis Dye is now a USC Trojan. So the opportunity is there. We're talking, this is the 12th ranked running back recruit in the 2021, high school recruiting class. So he's eligible in 24 in the NFL draft. And in his small sample size, he showed out. He was a good player. So I like his size. This is a 6 foot, 203-pound player on the tape, verified, and that's a big thing, right? We should have mentioned that already. For me, I want to see legit measurables. In college, you can only trust what measurements you're saying so much because all these schools are notorious for just blatantly lying. All of a sudden some player loses, 4 inches, or this player, loses 18, 20 pounds. It's like, obviously that didn't really happen. You were just fudging the numbers. So, when we get to the combine, when we get to, players' pro days, when we get real numbers, that factors in. But I like the recruiting profile, I like the size, and I like what I've seen production wise. So, that's 3 good points. So, yeah, give me some Byron Cardwell. I'm interested.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting prospect, but I just don't think you've seen enough yet to really rate him very very highly. He is a project really at this point. He's a projection. So
yeah, and that just highlights what we talked about earlier. Is that my tier 3 to 4? There's a huge gap, right? None of these players am I investing heavily in NFL production, right? I believe Charbonnet will be very good in, the C2C world in 2022. But outside of that, really nothing is guaranteed with these players.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have anything else about tier 4? You want to jump into tier 5?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So tier 5, Jase Mcclellan, Javonte Citizen, and Deuce Fawn. So, I think these are, again, these are guys, 2 of these guys are guys that are going to be potentially highly, highly rated 2023 draft picks. They're potentially, 3rd round picks, right? I think with Jase Mcclellan, he's a little bit more of a stretch just because, at least as a draft pick, just because he has been behind other players in Bama for a while now. And it doesn't look like he's going to start anytime soon. Now he is a candidate to come out in 2024 potentially. But I think that's a kind of an interesting thought process there.
we're at tier 5 here. Jase Mcclellan got the nod for me just based off of the recruiting profile for the most part. So last year was a tough year for him. He was injured. He was actually doing really well prior to his injury. He was very efficient. So I'm really curious to see how the backfield touches get split up, because I think him and Jahmyr Gibbs are the two obvious running backs this year. Issue is I could see Jahmyr Gibbs just being a total workhorse. That's not really his role, but Alabama likes to do that. They like to just really like find one player and just give them the ball like regularly. So if that happens, yeah, I think Jase Mcclellan is definitely probably staying another year in college and maybe even transferring. The really interesting one for me here is Deuce Fawn. So Deuce Fawn, if we were to so the reason he's only in tier 5 is because of the expected height and weight for this player that I'm expecting. This guy's tiny.
He's a third down back, most likely.
So I want you to guess the comp that I have for Deuce Fawn before I give it to the people.
Maurice Jones-Drew, Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Wow, those are very different qualities of players, huh? All right, so see, this is me showing my age a little bit, because if you'd watched this player in college, the comp, you would be like, oh, obviously Deuce Fawn, Kansas State, you are relating to Darren Sproles, also of Kansas State. So this is what I'm hoping for Deuce Fawn. These are the combine numbers for Darren Sproles. He was 5'6", but 187 pounds. Okay, that's a BMI of over 30. He had a 40-yard dash of 4.49, and he put up a 3.96 shuttle and a 6.96 three cone. Right. So what is that? You're talking about a short player, but they're thick, they're strong, and they're very agile. And obviously, right, both of them have great hands. No one is doubting Deuce Fawn's ability to catch the ball. I think, at least I'm certainly not. So that's where I see Deuce Fawn as being, possibly useful in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't think he has the potential. I don't think he's the same in terms of like his elusiveness. Darren Sproles was like the elite of elite in terms of his elusiveness, right? So, but I mean, yeah, they're similar players. But I just think that Deuce Fawn, he's a little bit. I think he's going to be a little bit more of a kind of a guy that, yeah, he's an elite pass catcher, but I kind of think he's going to be. I don't know. I've never been a big fan of Deuce Fawn. I've always thought he's a little bit undersized for what you're getting, and I don't think he has the elusiveness to really succeed in the NFL. But
yeah, well, the thing is right, he's in tier 5 for me. We talked about how big tier 3 to tier 4 is, right? Tier 4 to 5, not a big gap for me, but he's in tier 5. And that's mainly because these are Devy rankings, not C2C rankings, right? Deuce Fawn was an absolute superstar. He was the number 1 running back producer last year, at least in terms of who's returning this season, excuse me. I don't expect Deuce Fawn to be a huge contributor in the NFL, but I guess Darren Sproles is my comp. Darren Sproles is my like high-end comp, like what I'm hoping, I guess. And it's possible, right? What if he goes to the combine and he has similar numbers? If he does sub 4, sub 7, and the shuttle and the three cone, that's evidence to me that this guy has plenty good elusiveness, because he's on tape showing elusiveness. But it's Big 12, so it's like, how much am I going to trust that?
And they don't play defense in the pack.
Well, unless you're Baylor or Iowa State, but
yeah.
Yeah, in general, they don't. But I will say the Big 12 is getting a little better, but hey, they're about to lose Texas and Oklahoma. So, they're in a lot of trouble still. But yeah, I mean, Deuce Fawn, he showed me a lot of things on tape that I liked. I want to see the numbers, right? I fully believe in his ability to boot up huge fantasy football numbers in college. But before I'm going to invest anything, more than like a dart throw in my rookie drafts, for the NFL side. I want to see these Darren Sproles like combine numbers. If I don't see them, I'll be out, unless it's way late.
I think he's probably similar to Michael Carter in terms of maybe gets a 4th round value draft pick. He's a good pass catcher, but he's not elite as a pass catcher, but he's good enough. And I think that's kind of that's my comp. It really is Michael Carter. I think that's kind of what he really looks like to me. But do you have anything else about tier 5?
Well, let's just talk on Javonte Citizen.
Oh yeah, we never really talked about him, did we?
So this is another freshman, and Robert, I would love to hear your opinion on how you try and pick out freshmen. Like, do you just go down the rankings of these sites that, this is the number 1 recruit, this is the number 2 recruit, number 3? Do you look at, what schools they're going to? Do you look at, what are you looking for these freshmen running back? Well, really, yeah, let's go for freshman running backs.
Yeah. So, really the kind of 2 things I look at first and foremost is athletic profile, and then also what school you're going to. Those are the top 2, but athletic profile is the biggest for me. I want to see guys who are around, 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1", right? And, bigger backs. I prefer those. And then about 215, 220, or 200, about 190 to 210 really is kind of my go-to. Maybe a little bit heavier depending on your size, but we got to remember too that a lot of these guys are 18, right? So they're not fully developed in terms of their weight profile. A lot of these guys are going to put on weight when they go to college, and they get into college weight rooms. So big thing for me is I want to see guys on the tape that have speed and agility, right? It's hard to really judge that in college because obviously if you look at it, it's basically man against boys. All these guys who get drafted or to get selected to go to these high level college institutions are they're already better athletes than everybody else out there, right? So judging their top end speed off of that it's pretty tough depending on who they're playing. But that's a big thing for me is kind of going through their athletic profile. And if I think that you fill the athletic profile of a 1st round running back, then you pretty much you'll be at the top of my list. If I think you're like a borderline 3rd, 4th round running back based off just your athletic profile, like you can have all the other tools, but your profile puts you down to like a 3rd round running back, then I don't really want you at that point. Like if you fall, sure, but like that's kind of the big thing that I look at.
Yeah, it's good to discuss this, right? So that people understand why we're valuing players, right? We can talk about the players that have already gone in college. We can go off of their production. That's kind of easy, but it's these freshmen. I think it's really important to discuss that for. And I'm with you. I want to see size. I want to see athletic profile. And you're right about the tape, right? You can watch highlights. You can watch game tape of high school players all you want, but there's very few teams, very few games at the high school level where someone that's, we're projecting as an NFL star is playing against competition necessary to prove, oh yeah, look at what they're doing in the tape. So when I'm looking at athletic profile, I love, especially for running backs and especially for wide receivers, I love to see, are they a track player? Do they run track? Do they run the 100? Do they run the 2? Do they run the 4? Not so much the 4, but especially do they run the 1, 2, and maybe the 100 relays? And Javonte Citizen, he's not a world breaker with speed, right? You got some of these players that are sub 11 seconds in the 100 meter. That's legit speed. Sub 22 seconds in the 200. That's legit speed. So the PR for Javonte Citizen was 11:33. So 11 seconds, 33 hundredths of a second in the 100, and he ran at 22:19 in the 200. Those are good numbers. That shows he has good speed in burst, right? Straight line speed. Obviously, it's just straight line speed, but at least it's a measurable fact that we can base something off Additionally, right, he's got great size, right? Like you said, these are 18-year-old players. This dude's 6'2", 217. At least that's what we're getting reported, right? How much can we trust this? I don't know. And then, the next thing I'm looking at is, hey, what are the people that, have been doing this for a long time and are part of big organizations like 24/7 Sports? What are they saying about him? And they like the guy. He's their 9th ranked recruit. Additionally, Miami has kind of like this vacuum at running back. Like, I would not be surprised by the end of the year he's starting for them as a true freshman. So he's got all the, opportunity, and he has a lot of talent to really make a big jump. So that's why I threw Javonte Citizen in here. I think he's my 4th, maybe 5th rookie freshman running back. But, I like this player. I think they have a lot of potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much else with them. I think it's all projection. It's you're looking at the athletic profile, and like you said, you can't look at tape for freshmen and say this guy's going to be a superstar. Like that, they're playing against a bunch of guys that aren't going to go anywhere, right? And that's just the nature of the beast. Yeah. So you do want to move on to?
Yeah, let's keep this train going.
All right. And so this is your honorable mentions. So I'll let you have the floor. You can talk about these guys, kind of say what you think. And you have the floor.
All right. So the previous tiers that we spoke about was 18 total running backs, right? And these are the last 6 for my, if we're quote unquote going, RBs 1s and 2s in 12-team leagues. And if you look at it, what is it? It is 6 freshmen. So just like we talked about with Citizen, total projections here. And most of these schools are the big name schools. Texas, Jadon Blue. Although he's probably not going to see a lot of work this year because of Bichon Robinson, I think that Jadon Blue could take over and, be with Quinn Ewers for a year and then be with Manning for another year and really, explode. Javonte Barnes, another good player at another big school, Oklahoma. George Pettaway. He's a Virginia product. Maybe I'm being a homer here, but he actually grew up he went to high school in the same town that I live in. His high school is probably 15 miles from where I live. So I saw a highly rated, local kid that's going to UNC who has started to really produce some solid players, especially a good little string at running back. So, I just jumped on and said, I have to throw him in here. I'm interested in Pettaway. Le'Veon Moss. Yeah, I know you can laugh at me, but 24/7 Sports likes him too, so I can't be totally.
Oh, no, I just think it's funny you put the local kid on there because you.
Yep. Now you can all go and figure out where I live if you want. You can stalk me and go door to door and try and find wherever I live. It's a big city. Good luck. But anyways, so yeah, Le'Veon Moss. Let's hope he's as good as Le'Veon Bell, right? But this is another highly rated player. He went to Texas A&M. A&M, the reason this player isn't ranked much higher for me is because I don't like what A&M does on the offense side of the ball. Jimbo Fisher has one of the least explosive offenses in the entire freaking nation. Meanwhile, he recruits at top 5, top 7 every single year. Like Jimbo, swallow your pride and just, adapt. Saban did it. Saban for years was playing, Texas A&M style football, right? Remember the epic 9-6 victory against LSU, 10, 12 years, probably more than that actually. But, they've adapted and he needs to too, because he's got some great talents that could, do great things if you opened up that offense. So he actually takes a hit where he's going for me. Jaron Miller, he takes a hit because like we talked about, there's just so many bloody, good players at wide receiver or at Alabama. Which one do you pick? I guess you try and take them all and hope, at least one of them hits because probably one will. Raeshawn Luke. So he gets the Arizona hit, although if you haven't noticed, they've also have a superstar wide receiver recruit coming in the same class. We'll talk about that in our next episode. But he gets hit because of his size. He's 5'9" is what's reported. No, 5'8", 170, 175. That worries me. He's very highly ranked. I mean, he's the 18th ranked running back in the class. I mean, he's a mid 4-star recruit. I just worry about the size a little bit. But watch out for Arizona. I'm telling you, this might sound silly, but Arizona was the best one-win football team in 2021. They had so many close losses. They gave a lot of good teams, competitive fights. I think we're all going to be surprised what Arizona is doing in 3-4 years. And Raeshawn Luke is probably going to be a decent part of that.
Yeah, so like you said, right? These are all freshmen. I think all of these guys are interesting, like you said. I laughed a little bit about George Pettaway, but I think George Pettaway is a very good option at UNC. And then I agree with everything. I think Javonte Barnes is probably the big one that I'm interested in. Notre Dame, whenever Chip Kelly was there, or not Chip Kelly, Brian Kelly was there, always produced running backs. It seemed like. So I think Javonte Barnes is just another in that line for him. So I mean, I think all these guys are interesting. And I don't have much else. I think these are the next in the list of Devy running backs that you should get in terms of your freshman running backs. So, but to move on to mine, so my honorable mentions here are Braden Bennett from Coastal Carolina, Raeshawn Alley from Marshall, Lou Nichols from Central Michigan, Dwayne McBride from UAB, and then Titus Swin. So obviously all these guys are pretty much, your lower tier FBS schools. Now I think that doesn't really, to me, that's not something that I would say is like a bad thing though. I think you can get quality players from these lower division FBS schools, and all these guys are stars at their programs, or at least I project them to be stars. So just to kind of go off the first guy here. So Braden Bennett, he's 6'2", 200 pounds, was his listed size. Last year he had for his career, he had 8.5 yards per carry, 12.3 yards per catch. So he was kind of a a change of pace back last year for them because they had other really good running backs. He takes over the backfield this year at Coastal Carolina, and I think he's going to be a really big surprise. I would be shocked if he is not a higher ranked recruit come next year, or higher ranked C2C pick next year than he currently is. And I think he's kind of one of those guys that you can throw as like a kind of like a Rachaad White, where maybe you see him rise in the draft whenever he goes to the Senior Bowl. So he isn't eligible for the 2023 draft, but he is probably going to be going to the 2024 if I had to guess, unless he just has a massive year. There's same thing with Raeshawn Alley. So Raeshawn Alley, he's 6 foot, 201 pounds, 5.6 yards per carry in 2021, 45 receptions. He's a decent receiver, great runner. I think he needs to take a big an improvement as a receiver though, to jump to day 2. But I think he's a potential day 3 back coming into the season. And it's hard for these kind of lower division FBS players to jump into day 1 potential, but no, I can absolutely see him going into day 2. And then Lou Nichols. So Lou Nichols, he's 5'10", 220. He is the bruiser, but he has great burst and balance. He's not a great receiver yet. At least he hasn't showed it. He is the guy, he's going to be a first and second down back in the NFL. Now, the question is he good enough as a receiver to be in that like Leonard Fournette type of role? I think he is. And I have a high hopes for him in Devy. And again, I think he's a guy that's going to have day 2, day 3, day 2 potential if he shows a jump this year. He'll be coming out this year, and I would be shocked if he isn't drafted at least in the 4th round, if not higher. And then obviously we'll see him at the Senior Bowl. I would hope so. So Dwayne Mcbride, so he's 5'11", 215 pounds. He had 6.7 yards per carry for 1,371 yards last year. You know, again, I think he's another guy that you're hoping is going to explode. And I think he's going to be a big riser as well. All these guys, for me, these are all risers. I don't see these guys as like guys you can draft right now as like and say for sure like, oh, this guy is going to be a day 2 pick. But these are guys that are going to be that I think they can go into the off season and dominate the Senior Bowl or wherever, you know, they play, or maybe the Shrine Bowl. And we'll see. You know, I think that was why Rachaad White rose up so high, was because of his performance in the Senior Bowl. And I think you could kind of say the same thing for me for like Lou Nichols, Rasheed Alley, Dwayne McBride, and Titus Swin here. So Titus Swin as well. You know, he's 5'11", 202 pounds. He had 785 yards in 2021 on 5.9 yards per carry. He's a Doak Walker preseason candidate. And the big news there for me is that he took Valladay's job. So Valladay ended up transferring to Arizona State, I believe is what it was. And he, after Titus ended up breaking into his role, you know, I think he needed the transfer. So I don't think it was I need to go to a better school. I think it was, man, I might lose my job. So I think Titus is another really good candidate to rise. But my favorite out of this group, and I kind of glanced over him a little bit, was Braden Bennett. Braden Bennett is a burner and a huge body. If he can kind of show the lateral movement abilities that it looked like he had, and he continues to show that, he could be a elite running back in the NFL level. And I think he's 2 years away. I think he could come out this year, but I think it's probably more likely he comes out in 2024, like I said. But I think he is a guy that everybody needs to look out for Devy. I think he's a big name that could sneak up on people come 2024 draft.
I got to say, we definitely took a little different route. I mean, I know these are your honorable mentions, right? Obviously, these aren't your top ranked players, but you've got one, you know, Power 5 team player, and I think I have 24. Not quite sure if it was all Power 5 or not, but close to it. So I'm curious, right? These are all 23 players. Do you expect any of them to come out in 23, or do you expect them being, you know, the lower?
I have Raeshawn Alley, and Lou Nichols and Titus Swin are all going to come out in 2023, I believe.
Okay.
And then I think Dwayne McBride's kind of a toss-up for me, and then Braden Bennett, I believe, is in 2024.
Yeah, my next question has got to be, you know, do you think these players are looking at undrafted free agency or day 3 capital, or day 3 capital versus day 2 capital?
I think it's day 3 capital versus day 2. I think all these guys have shown enough to be day 3 picks already. Well, I mean, not Braden Bennett. Braden Bennett, I think, has not shown enough yet to be a draft pick in 2023. But he's also a true junior. So he has only played, you know, he played as behind guys in his freshman year, and he played behind a guy in his sophomore season. But he has amazing yards per carry and yards per catch numbers. And he has extreme explosiveness. If you watch him play against these guys, like, you're going to be like, man, why was this guy not a higher ranked recruit? Why is this guy not playing at like Alabama? Like, I legitimately think he could start at Alabama this year.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's certainly a vote of confidence. It's interesting to say. That was going to be my next question. I was going to say, do any of these players transfer, you know, going into the 2023 college football season to try and, you know, prove what they can do at a higher level of competition? Because, I mean, most of these players have shown, you know, high levels of dominance at their level of college football. And my thought is, if they were to transfer and go to a Power 5 program, like, look what Kenneth Walker was able to do, right? And he went from Power 5 to Power 5, right? He went from a Wake Forest. If they could just move into a bigger program and really turn it on, especially because most of these players, like you said, have very good size metrics. That to me would make them really ascend in value.
Yeah, I think Braden Bennett's the one that I would like to move to a Power 5 conference. I think if he moved to a Power 5 conference, like I think the sky's the limit. Like I like him a lot. I think he's got the potential to be a very, very good NFL running back. Obviously, we'll see this year. This is going to be his first year, like really starting at the college level. So kind of stay tuned. Maybe I'm just completely wrong, but I think that Braden Bennett is the guy that if you're looking to take like just a flyer on a guy and maybe it turned out to be gold, I think he's your guy. I think he, look at Kareem Hunt when he played at Toledo. I think he could be in that same category.
Yeah, and I got to give this to you. You're definitely, digging deep for these. I knew Raeshawn Allen and Lou Nichols. They had phenomenal seasons last year, in the college fantasy football world. I didn't honestly know the other three. So I'm happy that you're turning me on to these. Of course, when I go and check my roster, because both of the C2C leagues I play in with you. So, you've already got him locked up, and I'm just like, well, I guess he knows what he's doing. But yeah, I'd be interested. Perhaps I just need to join a league that you're not in, so I can go and take advantage of these values. Because especially that Brandon Bennett one, that one sounds super interesting with that size and speed that he possesses.
Yeah. So, so really, guys, we really thank everybody for listening. I like this episode a lot. I love talking about running backs for college, and especially the lower division guys. I think they all offer potential, and finding the guys that are college stars, but they can also translate to the NFL that are in the non-Power 5 schools. Like, I think that's important, and I think that's kind of a big way to win your drafts, your rookie drafts. So yeah. I don't have anything else that I want to talk about. Do you have anything else you want to close this out with, Erik?
Yeah, I just want to say how excited we are to be getting on the video. We've been hoping for this, really since we started. But, before you can run, you have to crawl. And we're starting to jog here as we get into video. We're really excited. Please subscribe, like, review, interact with us on Twitter. Please, engage with us any way you can, any way you would like. We appreciate that. We really enjoy bringing this content to you. And Robert, just want to thank you again for, doing this with me. I thought we had a great, first video here. It was really great to discuss running backs. And follow us everywhere. Interact, please.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.